You can find all the information on the ola.com website. And today, we are continuing a series of lectures on the Yoga of Falling in Love, which was read by Vadim Zaporozhtsov. Today we have a lecture from the 26th of April, 2010 year. Oh, on the 26th of January, 2000 of the 10th year. Which was read at the Cultural Center of Enlightenment, Moscow. And we begin. This lecture examines issues such as the connection with the Yoga of Falling in Love with the ancient treatise of the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, how difficult it can be to work with thought forms, and what obstacles arise along the way, who controls our thoughts, and what happens to them when we fall in love, why we should cross negative thoughts, and why we tend to lose this greatest gift, falling in love. The laws of creation are also considered in detail, according to the axiomatics of yoga. What kind of condition is this and how to keep them as long as possible? How does falling in love affect our lives and why is it so necessary? So, falling in love. This is an inner explosion of happiness. We considered this fact, the fact that a person involved in falling in love is very much involved in it, and gave an example of a chain reaction when one generates another, a third, and so on. Academician Semenov discovered the theory of chain reactions, which is used in the chemistry of nuclear energy. And in 1956 year, he received the Nobel Prize for it. The idea was that in certain systems, the first seed pulse is enough so that in the future, the reaction proceeds in an increasing, avalanche-like manner, and the number of particles involved in this reaction increases so strongly and quickly that an observer sees an explosive phenomenon from the outside. The same thing happens when experiencing falling in love. As soon as we become aware of falling in love, or it descends on us, then all the processes inside us are increasing. But unlike the chain reaction that academician Semenov wrote about, if we consider this process from the point of view of yoga theory, then we clearly see a somewhat opposite thing, namely, the long-term disappearance of parasitic thoughts from our heads. The parallel between the Yoga of Love, Yoga Sutra Patanjali. Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the most ancient dated text in the field of yoga, which is equally well recognized by both modern scientists and yoga adherents. It is quite concise, and it is unclear to the uninitiated what it is about. Let's draw a parallel between the Yoga of Falling in Love and this ancient treatise. Patanjali tried to cover the whole path of yoga. No matter what yoga practice a person does, there is always a skeleton, or the logic of the development of events. Patanjali divided this logic into 8 steps, and for the understandable language of his time. He outlined this system in appropriate terms, which did not pretend to be a comprehensive treatise on yoga at all, but was a kind of digest with extracts and highlights from the theory of yoga, where he referred to the main points in his work. Other more detailed sources have not survived to this day. In the system of Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the main idea of the yogic process, or the achievement of the highest goal, is that a person comes to the art or ability to reduce the number of thought forms on the surface of the mind, releasing their manifestations in the form of consciousness and energy in a pure, unaffected form. After that, we go to the source of our manifestations, the source of the one who comprehends, that is, to achieve our higher self. These 8 steps begin with moral and ethical principles, which actually represent what we would call the first, second, and partly the third principle of yoga. Then there is work with the physical body, which could be called a section of Hatha Yoga, work with breathing or Pranayama Yoga. And then a group of several stages begins, which in an intermediate version work with sensations, sensory organs and actions. This work should lead to the independence of thinking itself from the senses and organs of action, and, ultimately, lead to direct work with thought forms on the surface of our mind. These are the last 3 stages of the eightfold yoga system, or Ashtanga, and the barbell in Sanskrit means 8. The meaning of Yoga Sutra Patanjali boils down to the fact that moving from step to step, first comes an intuitive awareness of how to approach the management of thoughts, and then the opportunity, both physical and mental, to start working with them. Our thoughts are a very insidious thing. Removing them from the surface of the mind is not easy. The mechanisms of breathing or sensations are instantly activated. Thoughts know how to protect themselves, and it is not easy to work with them. Therefore, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, a yogi or yogini, as a military commander, besieges the enemy's fortress according to all the canons of conducting siege operations, and fights with his ignorance in the face of uncontrolled thought formations or an uncontrolled process of thinking. First, it is the moral and ethical principles that surround and make this fortress opaque, not allowing spies and saboteurs to penetrate from the outside. Then, the siege weapons in the form of hatha and pranayama yoga are used. The assault on the last sections of this path, the so-called Sanyama Patanjali, or the last 3 stages, culminating in samadhi, is when you broke into the enemy's fortress and dropped the flag of the highest tower. Usually in wars it was believed that if you captured the enemy's banner, then the enemy was defeated. That is also why there is such a reverent attitude to the banners. Samadhi is when you break into a fortress and actually win the battle. But the enemy is very strong, thought forms are very incomprehensible things. When you are just trying to stop the leapfrog of thoughts in your head, or a series of emotions caused by certain impressions. Then at the beginning, it seems that it is simple. You cannot think about this, and it already seems that to a certain extent, you begin to control your thoughts. But as soon as you reduce their number, you feel terrible resistance, as if they were angry and very aggressive animals. And if before that thoughts were like a stray dog, you stomp on it and it already runs away. Now it feels like these thoughts are like a dog cornered, and which has nothing to lose, which has already bared its teeth, bristled, and is ready to eat you. As we try to reduce the number of thought forms, each step is given with more and more difficulty. And each of the thought forms absorbs our natural invisibility in the form of energy, consciousness and pleasure, robbing us of ourselves. In some yogic works, the adepts exclaimed, "At last I realized who is my most important thief, who is stealing my happiness. And I intend to deal with it in the most ferocious way." All the uninitiated, of course, begin to think that he really found a real thief. But in fact, the thief is inside. The thief of involuntary thought formation, which literally sucks the remnants of your strength out of you. The more intellectually developed a person is, the more power these thoughts enjoy, which can be compared to a bureaucracy that does not want to work, but wants to live well, have status, rank, manage everything and do nothing, finding all sorts of evasions for this. If a bureaucracy begins to rule in one or another state, this state perishes. But on the other hand, it is impossible without bureaucracy. Try to live without it for a couple of days, and there will be such anarchy, lawlessness and chaos, that any bureaucracy will seem like happiness. The question is whether a person knows how to control his thoughts, as if it were a czar who knows how to control his boyars or subordinates. Or sometimes, under the most plausible pretexts, money is spent, which is earned in a lot of work by many people. The battle with your thoughts is going to be long, and not a little fierce. What happens when we fall in love? But a miracle happened. You are involved in falling in love. This state has come to us and we are experiencing it. For ordinary people, these are just glimpses of falling in love or feelings in the first approximation. That is, it is not the highest transcendental love, which the South of Love speaks of ideally. These are the slightest glimpses that immediately sink into the swamp of our inactive, negative karma, and as a result, we have an even greater area of work on ourselves. But if we fall in love, we get involved in it, and if it has reached us at least for a fraction of a second, then, as with academician Semenov, the process goes avalanche-like with the inclusion of millions of thoughts that can spin in our head, completely uncontrollably. As a result, thoughts abruptly begin to outlive themselves or take shape. The state of falling in love and all thoughts associated with it are associated with the object of falling in love. A young man thinks about a girl and a girl thinks about a young man. Everything that resembles her becomes sacred to him. The street she walked, the house she lives in, the ice cream she likes to eat, her favorite flowers. The same color as the color of her blouse. For a person in love, it all starts to become a reality. And these thoughts dedicated to the object of falling in love become the strongest antidote to other thoughts that completely chaotically and uncontrollably replace one another for us. This dance is programmed by our negative karma. But every thought arises for a reason. It was generated by thoughts and impressions that a person had experienced before, and those, in turn, were generated by impressions that a person had experienced before, and so on. If the program. There is a program, what kind of thought should appear? The thought of fear, hope, or fulfillment. We are like a programmed computer, where after a certain time, as if on a timer, a certain thought appears, which is determined by previous actions. It is for this reason that Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras reduced the work to working with his thoughts, which is very interesting and gives an amazing result. When we think about the object of our love, it takes away the energy of all other parasitic thoughts, an endless cycle roars, where one thought generates another, another third, fourth, fifth, and so on. There are a lot of such chains, and each thought in the object of falling in love closes this chain to an object or image that is associated with this state and leads out of the cycle of uncontrolled thoughts, energy and consciousness, directing it to the object of falling in love. In this completely natural way comes the ability to eliminate parasitic thoughts and concentrate on thoughts in the right ones. Moreover, all this happens without a bend, without a carrot, and even without a person realizing that he should think about one thought, as they are called to do in meditations where it is necessary to focus consciousness. Usually, a person forces himself, or finds a trick, to approach a limited number of thoughts or phenomena. And here it all happens naturally, and even incrementally. The more, the more. Moreover, if you, thinking about the attributes of falling in love, broke the chain, and removed the energy of consciousness from it, then this branch of your karma dries up, fulfills itself, and becomes lifeless. A thought can flow along a variety of trajectories, and any object can lead to gray thoughts and experiences. A person goes outside, it's cold, it's snowing, it's bad. And then a series of thoughts begins. It will be today, and tomorrow, and in general, until the end of days. And in general, I don't get paid. The coat is cold, but there is no money, because the boss does not add salary, but does not add, because he is a bastard. And the bastard, because the whole situation in the country is disgusting. A person begins to wind himself up, goes to fantastic heights, and comes to the conclusion that this world is perishable. And it needs to be abandoned. Everything is bad, and it will be even worse. And it all started from one thought, that it's cold outside and it's snowing. Imagine the same thought. A man goes out, but it's cold outside. Thinks, it's my beloved cold. But I remember Pushkin's poem Frost and the Sun, a wonderful day. And there is already a strategy of directing thinking in the other direction. It's cold, but also wonderful. Snow, it means let's go skiing, and it will be fine. Chains of thoughts and events around the object of love are attracted like a magnet, which causes maximum joy, happiness, and enjoyment, cutting off possible other ways. You avoid conditions for the germination of negative karma. This is a method from Karma Yoga. He concludes that if you feel a negative tendency in yourself, then in every possible way avoid conditions where it can wake up and develop. If you know that the field is sown with weed, then you do not need to water it, because it can come up. So let it stay dry until you eliminate the seeds, avoiding temptations. There are people who, on the contrary, are trying to test their strength, bravery, quick reactions. This is an extreme. They are looking for a challenge, overcome it, and feel good. This is a good pastime, if it is not associated with outright self-harm or danger to others. But here you first prepared, then met your enemy and defeated him. And imagine that your enemy is much stronger than you. In this case, it is better to conduct a guerrilla strategy, and not get caught in his eyes until they get stronger. Why fight with a stronger enemy? And in ordinary karma yoga, you need to constantly stop thoughts. When you feel that thought after thought leads to pessimism, you must suppress this chain with an effort of will. To say, no, we will not have any financial crisis, and if there is, it will be avoided. Everyone has their own fears. And as soon as you feel that such thoughts come, the sooner you break the chain and switch to something else, the better. Otherwise, panic will begin, and panic is 100% defeat. In the yoga of falling in love, there is no need to worry about this, because all thoughts will lead you out of the negative karmic chain, and lead to thinking about the object of your falling in love, thereby blocking the opportunity to turn around negative tendencies, that is, fear, stupidity, anger. Accordingly, you will not spur the surrounding events, because everything is quite cunningly interconnected. This does not mean that you need to be an idiot and bury your head in the sand like an ostrich, not thinking about the upcoming problems. You need to think about them, but in a detached and constructive way. The worst thing is panic. In our yoga school, they say this about this. Do not be so afraid of negative external influence as of your inadequate reaction to this influence. Because the consequences of the reaction can be more terrible than the impact itself. Yoga of falling in love, or a person in this state, beautifully closes the vector of movement of his consciousness and energy. The vector of his thoughts. First, look at the attributes of the person he is in love with. Because falling in love does not come to us in the highest transcendental form, but through a specific person. When we fall in love with someone, therefore, the person himself and everything that surrounds him becomes sacred to the one who falls in love with him. Love has its roots in the transcendental foundations of the creation of the world. The whole world was created out of falling in love, by falling in love itself, and for falling in love. From the position of the yoga of falling in love, all our thoughts or aspirations from parasitic departures to the side. First, concentrate on the attributes of the person with whom we are in love, then on the person himself, and through him, the higher. Thus, a person who is in a state of falling in love on a short leg with the Supreme, even if these are glimpses of it. So, when we get involved in the universe, we get out of it. When falling in love, the process of neuritis turns out, which we have already talked about in the yoga of the triad. Our entire life in this universe can be divided into two processes. The first one, involvement in the universe when we wallow in it and complicate everything. And the second one is the exit from the universe. The criterion of fast methods is when one stream absorbs another, when we get involved in the universe, and at the same time, we get out of it. In the state of falling in love, there is a mutual absorption of these flows. Spend this immersion in the universe and don't lie. This is the way out of it. Thinking about the girl we are in love with and idolizing her every gesture and look. String has a song on this score. I will watch you every gesture, every look. You are even more involved in the universe. By the way, Sting is close to tantric circles. Falling in love comes from above, otherwise you wouldn't give a damn what your girlfriend is wearing, or what flowers she likes, or what she does. And falling in love. This is the channel to the first reason. According to the axiomatics of yoga, the state of falling in love is the level of the state of law 1. Passing into the level of law 1. For a person in love, only he and his object of love remain. No one else. The whole universe has disappeared. And in the future, as we move forward, when only he and his girlfriend exist, their fusion naturally occurs, reaching the level of law 1, or one of the highest levels of the manifested absolute. Reflecting on all the attributes of falling in love, the process of neuritis naturally occurs and exit from this universe. Because the rest of the world already exists according to other laws, the laws of 4 and 5, according to the interaction of all forms, phenomena, objects, and living beings. And here you kind of get out of it, and everything else becomes uninteresting. But not because it's not interesting, because you don't even think about it. You suddenly found something so strong, bright, happy, joyful that you think about and want to sing, and everything else is forgotten. Without forcing yourself, you forget about the rest of the world. As a result, such a person naturally fulfills the third principle of yoga. The dinner of giving up suffering. What kind of suffering if you want to sing? Moreover, I want to share it. And when everyone starts walking around sad and pessimistic, it is perceived as a misunderstanding for a person who is in a state of love. He wants everyone around to have fun, dance, and go crazy just like him. Neurite. This is a natural exit process. Pravrit and neurite merge. From the point of view of Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, your whole world can consist of a huge number of parasitic thoughts. Impressions wandering through the senses, in which you are drowning like in a swamp. And this is a nightmare from which they will wake up. But here there is an opportunity to get out of this leapfrog of unconscious thoughts and impressions, as a result of which the number of thoughts in the form is reduced first to the number of attributes around the objects of love. And then you forget about them and concentrate on the person himself. So, why do we lose love? In the future, a very severe axiomatic error occurs when the loss of love begins. All our problems are due to ignorance. When, having discarded all attributes, you reach the person himself, you do not see that he is no more or less than the absolute itself, or the universe itself, but instead concentrate on him as just a person. Then you will lay the first piece of explosive to destroy your love. From this moment, the countdown will begin. Falling in love will begin to melt. This loss occurs for the simple reason that you will begin to confuse the person himself with his attributes and, of course, with his previous karma, positive or negative. And the more you concentrate on the person himself, the more the process of reducing thought forms will begin to slow down, and then completely reverse. And you will already begin to see in the object of your love the little things, the nuances that also surround it. But at first, they will not be linked to the state of falling in love, and then they will slowly but surely distract you. You will not be able to achieve, as prescribed in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the reduction of thought forms on the surface of the mind. Form many to one, and then discard it and go into samadhi without an object. If at least one thought form remains, Patanjali calls it samadhi with an object. If a young man is in love with a girl, then this thought form is his girlfriend as a whole. Not as hands, legs, head, hairstyle, or any other moments, but as a whole, that is, as the higher self of this girl. And all her arms, legs, head, and hairstyle are the form through which this higher self shines. If you fall in love and reach the contemplation of the higher self of the person you have fallen in love with, you will automatically go out into samarthi from the object. And from the point of view of axiomatics, there is no difference between the nature of the higher self and the nature of the absolute, who created this entire universe. Thus, the girl's higher self and the absolute self merge, and between them, as in mathematics, you can put a sign of identity. This is called samadhi with an object. And then it is very easy to take the next step and see through the girl's ego, the ego of the absolute, as well as the absolute itself in its initially unmanifested form, that is, to reach the law, to the level of the law of zero or samadhi without an object. After that, the purpose of your life is perfect, and you cannot return to this world. When this happens, a yogi or a yogi, as they say, discards their bodies or leaves maha samadhi, or the greatest samadhi. For ordinary people who surround them, it can look completely different. Someone may even say that a person has died. But miracles happen. Her to Ilyina. Before leaving, Mahasamadhi do all kinds of tricks. For example, they dissolve their bodies in a rainbow to show that they have not just died, but have left this world. And they no longer need bodies, giving numerous students and followers an extra reason to reflect on their fate, life and death. Their bodies disappear, or as they would say in ancient metaphysics, disintegrate into the first elements. But a person who has dissolved his body in this way has reached the transcendental level of samadhi without an object. If we assume from our position that he wanted to come back, then he would immediately materialize into his body again. We'll bring in the old, the new, whatever. This is already the level where our ideas about death, birth, miracles do not work at all. There are completely different laws there. Therefore, a person who has achieved such power in the state of Mahasamadhi can materialize anywhere in the universe, in any guise, or be reborn as a small child, if he considers that this will be more understandable for his future students. They return from this state only for one purpose, to teach others. In this way, the greatest yogs and yogs are born on earth. And this is yoga, which we learn from their mouths. They left, and then came back to this world. But not because they need to do something here or experience any yoga, but only to tell us this way. From the point of view of yoga in the morning Patanjali, yoga of falling in love is a very fast and painless exciting system, in which all the necessary ticks to achieve samadhi, according to Patanjali, are fulfilled. But they are executed quickly and imperceptibly. And if you dump a person on which one, if you ask a person on what criteria of yoga super pressed he is, then he probably will not understand what you are asking. Because he is so much captured by love that everything else seems to have little to do with the matter. In any case, he does not spend his days and nights correlating the yogic experience with our ideas. He just lives it. The state of falling in love leads to an avalanche or chain reaction, a reduction of thought forms down to one thought form. This is samadhi with an object. And in the future, this last form is also destroyed, and a person goes into samadhi without an object, or in fact, what this world was created for. According to axiomatics, first there was law zero, and then there was Law 1, then Law 2, then Law 4 and 5. After that, everything collapsed, as if it had gone in the opposite direction. More precisely, there was a moment of entry, a certain action, and the moment of exit. And the entrance itself, and the action itself, was necessary in order for there to be a moment of exit. We came here from the level of Law 0, and we will go to the same level. But there's probably a difference between how we got in and out. But this is such a superlogical difference that it is impossible to answer it in ordinary language. The Yoga of Falling in Love, as well as the Yoga Sutra, as well as in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, works with thought forms. Now let's analyze the following thought or branch, which we have already mentioned. The most fundamental prerequisites for the loss of falling in love begin from the moment you stop feeling the essence of falling in love, and begin to grasp its attributes again. This happens as follows. At first, out of all the variety of your thoughts, it all comes down to the attributes or image of your beloved girl. The thought shrinks then even closer. You don't care what she's wearing anymore, that is, the second layer of thought disappears. You don't care what kind of character she has, because if you are in love with her, this is the most wonderful character for you. All the surrounding details begin to shrink, and you go inside. If there is a moment when you understand the essence of the higher self of the person you have fallen in love with, or see the channel of the infinite absolute behind its outlines, then you will pass through this very narrow neck. In real life, it turns out the exact opposite thing. There are attributes that somehow characterize this person, his habits, behavior, because everyone has their own background. Character traits. If you get hung up on them or pay too much attention to them, then at first you will be out of a state of bewilderment. How is that? The ideal of my falling in love can demonstrate negative character traits. These are small things, but it all starts with them. A chain of parasitic thoughts that you again, like a seed, throw around the person who was the object of love. And since no one has cancelled your negative karma, then you pull out all your negative ideas and impose them on those that a person has. Thus, the processes of parasitic thoughts that revolved around us and which we suppressed with such a miracle when we were in love, suddenly at some point begin to cling to the attributes of your girl and develop them and multiply them. It can be a variety of thoughts. For example, a girl loves this and that, but from previous experience a person has a thought. Yes, before that I had a girlfriend who also loved it. But then this girlfriend turned out to be a bitch and there was a lot of trouble from her. And associative connections and modified negative karma, like tentacles, begin to stick to the attributes of the girl we are in love with and spin our nasty web there. And add your negative karma plus the karma of the girl you fell in love with. Agree that we fall in love, we don't know who, because it's a gift. There is an expression from love to hate, one step. Exactly the same situation happens with the loss of love. All of our negative karma came to its senses from such a blow, came to its senses, and began to reanimate itself. No one has cancelled the law of karma. The universe is the universe. This is a stable system. Falling in love is an exit to a more universal law than the laws of karma. But this universal law does not refute karma at all in the sense that there is no karma, and it is not really needed. Yes, he can gracefully bypass it or gracefully resolve it, but if nothing is done, then everything can return to its circle. And this explains why ordinary people have a tendency to fall in love. Moreover, negative karma can also return with interest. This happens when a person loved someone very passionately, and after a while, they begin to hate the object of their former love terribly. Or more than that, makes him the most terrible enemy. Everything is explained simply. The peaks of the rise were too high, and the fall into the abyss of their negative karma was too deep. And that's why none of the ordinary people gain that time in the state of love, which is called 9.5 minutes. It seems very little. We do not gain, or do not have time to use it and extend the state for such a period. Otherwise there would be forces to deal with our negative karma, even with the one that we carry. Since the time of life in the bodies of dinosaurs. But we destroy all this before we are able to use the gift. Therefore, falling in love tends to disappear, and we again slide into the processes of parasitic thinking. This is the end of the lecture. there will be a second part. We will read it on Thursday. Let's write how much. Yes. And we remind you that our names are Tatiana Tatva and Anton Givo. You are teachers of the Open Yoga School. All information is on the website of the OpenYogaClass.com. There are free yoga courses as well as paid teacher training in Russian and English. Thank you all. Join us. Bye.